Ethan Miller turned the key and listened to the engine cough like an old man waking from a bad dream. Metal rattled. Something hissed. Then silence. He rested his forehead against the cracked steering wheel and closed his eyes, counting his breaths the way he did whenever panic tried to rise too fast. This car was the last thing he owned that had any value at all, if you could still call it value. The paint was peeled down to dull scars of rust, the driver's door only opened from the inside, and the radio had been dead since his wife's last hospital visit 3 years ago. Yet it had carried him to work, carried his daughter to school, carried groceries, carried grief, carried hope. Today, he was going to sell it. Not to upgrade, not to move forward, just to buy a train ticket. Ethan stepped out, boots scraping on the cold pavement of the used car lot. The morning air bit into his hands, but he didn't bother with gloves. He wanted to feel something sharp and real. Across the street, the city woke up in layers, buses groaning, vendors shouting, horns impatient with the world. Life moved on, whether he was ready or not. Inside his jacket pocket was a folded piece of paper, creased so many times it felt soft as cloth. A letter, an address, a chance that might not even be real. Dad. He turned. Lily stood a few steps behind him, backpack hanging loose on her shoulders, dark hair tied into a messy ponytail she never let him fix properly. She was 12 now, too old to believe in miracles, too young to stop hoping for them. "You okay?" she asked. Ethan forced a smile. "Yeah, Peanut. Just cold." She looked past him at the car, her expression tightening. She had grown up in the back seat of that vehicle, homework spread across torn upholstery, naps during long shifts when he had nowhere else to take her, whispered conversations late at night when he pretended not to cry. "They're really going to buy it?" she asked. "Someone will," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "It doesn't matter how much. We just need enough." "For the ticket," she said quietly. He nodded. The man from the lot approached them, chewing gum like it had personally offended him. He gave the car a quick glance, didn't bother opening the hood, and shrugged. "Scrap value," he said. "I'll give you $400. Ethan felt the number settle into his chest like a stone. It was less than he'd hoped, less than the car deserved, less than the years it had given him. But it was enough for 2 train tickets, one way. "Deal," Ethan said before the man could change his mind. Lily's fingers curled into the fabric of his jacket. "Dad." He looked down at her. "It's okay." It wasn't. He knew that. She knew that. But sometimes okay was just another word for necessary. By the time the paperwork was done, the car no longer belonged to them. Ethan handed over the keys, metal cool against his palm, and felt something inside him loosen and tear at the same time. He didn't look back as they walked away. If he did, he might not keep moving. The train station was loud and echoing, filled with strangers carrying destinations like armor. Lily sat beside him on a hard bench, swinging her legs, pretending not to be nervous. Ethan watched the digital board flicker with arrivals and departures, each line a different life he could have lived. He checked the time again. "Dad," Lily said, what if they don't even remember you?" The question landed harder than she intended. He swallowed. "They will," he said. "And even if they don't, we'll remind them." 3 years ago, when the hospital machines had gone quiet and the world had lost color, Ethan had found the letter tucked into a box of old papers. It was written in a hurried hand, addressed to him, signed by a man he hadn't spoken to in over a decade. Daniel Roth. Back then, they had been young, reckless, full of plans too big for their pockets. Daniel had always dreamed louder than anyone Ethan knew. He talked about changing industries, about building something that would outlive him. Ethan had believed in him, helped him, stood beside him, until life pulled them in different directions. The letter was short, apologetic, full of regret. "If you ever need me," it read, "you know where to find me." At the bottom was an address. A city far away. A name now worth billions. Ethan had folded the letter and put it away, telling himself he would never use it. Pride was easier when you still had options. Pride was a luxury he no longer owned. The train arrived with a scream of brakes. They boarded, found their seats, and watched the city slide away through smudged windows. Lily leaned her head against his shoulder and fell asleep, trusting him the way only a child can. Ethan stared out at the passing landscape and wondered if he was making the biggest mistake of his life, or the only one left. 2 days later, they stood outside a building that looked nothing like the world Ethan knew. Glass and steel rose into the sky, reflecting clouds that moved faster than his thoughts. The name Roth Global was etched above the entrance in letters so clean they felt untouchable. Lily squeezed his hand. "This is it. This is it," he said, though his stomach churned. Inside, everything smelled like polish and money. People walked with purpose, speaking into devices that probably cost more than Ethan's entire life. A receptionist looked up as they approached, her smile professional and distant. "Can I help you?" Ethan cleared his throat. "I'm here to see Daniel Roth." The smile didn't change, but something behind it did. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Ethan said. "But, he asked me to come. Years ago." The receptionist studied him, his worn jacket, Lily's scuffed shoes, the exhaustion etched into his face. She hesitated, then picked up the phone. A long wait followed. Too long. Lily shifted from foot to foot. Ethan began to feel foolish, small, invisible. Then the elevator doors opened. A man stepped out surrounded by assistants, tall and confident, silver at his temples. His suit was flawless, his expression controlled, until his eyes landed on Ethan. Everything stopped. "Ethan," Daniel said, disbelief cracking through his voice. For a moment, neither of them moved. The years between them collapsed into something fragile and raw. Daniel waved away his assistants without looking at them. "Clear my schedule," he said. "Now." He walked toward Ethan slowly, as if afraid the image would disappear. "You came." Ethan nodded. "I didn't know where else to go." Daniel's gaze dropped to Lily. "And this must be my daughter," Ethan said. "Lily." Daniel's expression softened in a way no headline had ever captured. "She's beautiful." The meeting room they sat in was larger than Ethan's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city like a living map. Daniel listened as Ethan spoke, not interrupting, not judging. He heard about the accident, the hospital bills, the nights spent choosing between food and heat, the car sold for a train ticket. When Ethan finished, his hands were shaking. "I didn't come to ask for money," he said quickly. "I just needed a chance. Work. Anything." Daniel leaned back, eyes distant. "Do you know why I became a billionaire?" he asked. Ethan shook his head. "Because someone believed in me when I had nothing," Daniel said quietly. "And because someone else walked away when I forgot who I was." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city he owned pieces of. "I've spent years buying companies, assets, numbers on a screen. But some debts don't disappear with success." He turned back to Ethan. "Where's the car?" Ethan frowned. "I sold it." "For how much?" $400. Daniel let out a breath that was almost a laugh, almost a sob. "Do you know what that car is worth?" Ethan shook his head again. "Everything," Daniel said. "Because it carried you here." Hours later, as the sun dipped low, Daniel made a call that would ripple through markets by morning. He ordered his team to locate the car immediately. When they found it, sitting in a scrap yard with a price tag barely worth notice, Daniel bought it. For $1 million. Not because it ran, not because it was rare, but because it was proof. Proof of sacrifice. Proof of love. Proof that hope sometimes looks like rust and broken engines. When Ethan heard the number, he couldn't speak. Lily stared at Daniel like he'd just rewritten reality. "This isn't charity," Daniel said firmly. "It's repayment. And it's a beginning." Ethan felt tears spill freely, unashamed. For the first time in years, the weight on his chest eased, not because the pain was gone, but because he didn't have to carry it alone anymore. Outside, the city lights flickered on, one by one. And somewhere in a scrapyard, an old broken car waited, not as junk, but as a symbol of the day a single dad sold his last hope, and found something greater waiting on the other side. Ethan did not sleep that night. The hotel room Daniel had arranged was quiet, warm, impossibly clean. Lily slept on the bed beside him, curled around a pillow, her breathing slow and even, the kind of peace Ethan had not seen on her face in years. He sat in the armchair near the window, staring at the city lights, afraid that if he closed his eyes, everything would vanish. $1 million. The number echoed in his head like something unreal, like a mistake that would be corrected in the morning. His hands trembled as he pressed them together. For so long, his life had been shaped by subtraction, subtracting meals, subtracting comfort, subtracting dreams. Now, suddenly, the math no longer made sense. Memories came uninvited. His wife, Sarah, laughing in the passenger seat of that same broken car, teasing him for driving too slow. Lily is a toddler, asleep in the back, clutching a stuffed rabbit. The night the car broke down outside the hospital, and Ethan had pushed it himself through the rain because ambulances cost money he didn't have. That car had carried grief like a burden and love like a promise. A soft knock broke his thoughts. Daniel stood at the door, jacket off, tie loosened, looking less like a billionaire and more like the man Ethan once knew. "Couldn't sleep either?" Daniel asked quietly. Ethan shook his head and stepped aside. Daniel entered, his gaze lingering on Lily before turning back. "I meant what I said earlier," Daniel said. "This isn't pity." Ethan's voice cracked. "I don't know how to say thank you without sounding small." Daniel leaned against the wall. "Then don't say it. Just tell me the truth." Ethan hesitated, then let the words spill out. The fear of waking up to another unpaid bill. The shame of asking Lily to pretend she wasn't hungry. The nights he'd sat in the dark wondering if loving his daughter was enough to keep them alive. "I was terrified I'd fail her," Ethan whispered. "That one day she'd look at me and see only what I couldn't give." Daniel's eyes glistened. "She already sees everything you did." The next morning, Lily woke to sunlight flooding the room. For the first time in a long while, she didn't rush to get dressed, didn't ask if they needed to leave early to save money. She padded over to Ethan and hugged him tight. "Dad," she said softly, "are we still us?" The question cut deeper than any bill or eviction notice ever had. Ethan knelt in front of her, holding her face gently. "Always," he said. "Money doesn't change that. It just gives us room to breathe." Later that day, Daniel insisted they come with him. The scrap yard sat on the edge of the city, surrounded by chain-link fences and silence. And there it was, the car. Ethan's car. Rusted, dented, familiar. Lily ran ahead and touched the door like she was greeting an old friend. Daniel watched them quietly. "I'm not fixing it," he said. Ethan looked up, confused. "I'm preserving it," Daniel continued. "Exactly as it is. I want people to see it." "To see what?" Ethan asked. Daniel smiled sadly. "That success doesn't start with perfection. Sometimes it starts with desperation and love." Weeks passed, but life did not suddenly become easy, it became possible. Ethan turned down offers of quick money and accepted something harder, responsibility. Daniel gave him a role in the company, not as charity but as partnership. Ethan worked long hours again, but this time, Lily did her homework at a desk instead of the back seat of a car. They moved into a small apartment with windows that let light in. Ethan bought groceries without counting every item twice. Lily joined a school art club and came home covered in paint and joy. One evening, months later, Ethan stood beside Daniel in a quiet gallery. The car sat under soft lights, surrounded by people who stared at it with curiosity and confusion. A plaque beside it read, "This car was sold for a train ticket." It carried a father and his daughter toward hope. Value is not measured in metal, but in sacrifice. Lily slipped her hand into Ethan's. "Dad," she whispered, "I'm glad you sold it." Ethan swallowed hard. "Me too." Daniel approached them. "You know," he said, "people ask me why I paid $1 million for a broken car." "And what do you tell them?" Ethan asked. Daniel looked at Lily, then back at Ethan. "That I didn't buy a car. I bought a reminder. A reminder of friendship. A reminder of humility. A reminder that the richest thing a man can own is the courage to keep going for someone who depends on him." As they walked out into the evening air, Ethan felt something unfamiliar but beautiful settle into his chest. Not relief, not wealth, but peace. Because sometimes, when a single dad sells his last hope, the world finally decides to give it back, multiplied by love.